Thank you. Welcome, elected members, to the Ordinary Council meeting for July 2021. It's Monday, 19th of July, and I'll now hand over to Mayor Brad Flaherty for the officiate.
Thanks, Matt. We acknowledge the Barngarla people, the traditional owners of the land we meet on today, and their continuing connection to the land, sea, culture and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our community. The City of Port Lincoln acknowledges and respects the diversity of cultural heritage and beliefs within our community. As a council, we are committed to serving the best interests and needs of all people in our city, and we endeavour to discharge our duties conscientiously to the best of our ability. Thanks very much. Please be seated. Welcome to the gallery, welcome to elected members, and welcome to staff. Elected members present, we have Councillor Broadfoot, Councillor Rousell, Councillor Lynn, Councillor Davis, Councillor Davies, Deputy Mayor Ritchie and Councillor Dodd. Apologies from Councillor Peter Jolly and Councillor Valerie Staunton tonight. Were there any declarations of conflict of interest tonight, please? Councillor Broadfoot.
I'll declare an interest in 13.1.1, which is around the policy for community funding, as a perceived conflict of interest because I'm a member of Southern Air Arts and I'll stay in the meeting.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Rousell, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I missed that. My apologies. I'll fill out the form later. I will have a perceived conflict of interest too, but I would like to stay.
Same issue?
Yes, from what on. Thank you.
Yep, okay, thanks.
My apologies for that.
Councillor Lynn, you're right. Councillor Davis, you didn't have any? Councillor Davies?
Yes, I've got 14.3.1 perceived interest because I work at Community House, but I don't get paid or anything from the pantry in 14.3.1. So is that policy coming up?
Perceived conflict of interest reads 13.3.1 review of funding policy. Being chair of the chamber and chair of Southern Air Arts. Yeah.
So perceived or
perceived, and I'll sign the name.
okay, and yours was perceived, wasn't it?
Yep.
And you're staying in? Yeah, Councillor Dodd. Okay. Thanks for that. Item 4 is a confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. 4.1 is a confirmation of the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 21st of June, ordinary meeting. Can I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Councillor Davis, to speak on it. Have a second, please. Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on it? Any statements for or against or questions of clarification? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 4.2 is a confirmation of the minutes of the previous special council meeting on 28th June. Any discussion? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Rousell, would you like to speak on it? Have a second. Councillor Broadfoot, will speak on it. Is there any clarifying questions? Any statements for and against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 5 is adjourned order. Items there are nil. Item 6 is questions with and without notice. Question without notice from Councillor Davies regarding traffic management around the Boston Bean coffee company shop on Morlock Terrace. Matt, do you want to talk on that at all?
Through you, Mayor Brad, this was the question without notice. It was raised at the last council meeting and basically just a written confirmation of the response received there. So I guess if there's any other questions on that, then JP's here to answer those.
Some clarifying questions, Councillor.
Yes, through you, Mayor Brad, I'd just like to ask, what is the status of the repairs and review of the roundabouts in Port Lincoln, Liverpool Street, Porter Street and Morlock Terrace? They're all Department of Infrastructure and Transport responsibility, and they're getting worse, those roads. Porter Street in particular, and the other end of Liverpool Street around Food Lane, McDonald's.
Yep. Through you, Member Brad. So elected members might recall that we wrote to the department in March. We haven't received a response to that correspondence. That was in relation to a number of matters, including the roundabouts. That's been since escalated by Mayor Brad to the Minister
Thank you.
as of last month.
Right.
That has not had a response that we're aware of. We do have a meeting which is scheduled for next week with the maintenance coordinator for Department of Transport on the Eyre Peninsula, which will be raising a number of these matters.
Okay, thank you. Because it is, unless we know that something's happening, by the time we get to September, October, November, when they start using the hot mix again, we need to have the plan in place rather than still be asking what's going on, because they've got a new budget, there's elections coming up next year. It is a responsibility, and there's also the consideration for people crossing the road as pedestrians. And I did see a lady stumble the other day walking from Foodland across the road into a dip in a crack that was in that road. And if she had fallen over, we would have had one squashed person. Very much so, with the speed of cars coming around the straight. So it is getting to a point where it is impacting not only on traffic, but also pedestrians crossing any of that area.
So you're okay? You've got the maintenance.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Davies, that covers the question.
Yeah, especially number 7 probably. Council will consult with the traffic management specialist to determine parking issues could potentially create a blind spot. That was pretty much my concern. That the parking of the cars along the side coming out of Wade Street was creating a blind spot. So that's covered it very well. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there any further clarifying questions there? No, thanks very much for that. Item 7 is notice of motion, there are none. Item 8 is petitions, none. Item 9, deputations and presentations. The Port Lincoln Art Group area users would like to give us an update. And so I welcome representatives from Art Area to come forward and give us a presentation. That'd be great.
Good evening. My name's Jenny Wilson and I'm Secretary of Air Arts Action and President of the Port Lincoln Art Group. My colleague is Raylene Fuller, who is the Secretary of the Port Lincoln Art Group, and we are both local artists. Raylene and I are here representing the regular users of Art Area Workshop Gallery, the blue building with fish on the bike. At present, the regular users are the Port Lincoln City Band, the Port Lincoln Art Group, Port Lincoln Quilters Guild, Port Lincoln Drawing Group and Meals on Wheels. Firstly, I would like to thank the Council for supporting the arts community in upgrading Art Area with remedial work and refurbishment. I would also like to take this opportunity to address some concerns about the Council prioritising this project. I'm aware that some of you present were councillors when the commitment to the renovations was made in the 2019-20 and business plan and know the history of Art Area. However, some of you are newly elected members, so I will give you a potted history of the building, or how did we get here. To quote local artist and president of the Air Arts Action, Sandy Harder, our fish on the bike sculpture began its life on another building named Art Area, located in Washington Street in the early 1980s. 28 Washington Street was the local art, craft and culture hub. This building was gifted to the City of Port Lincoln in exchange for a space to accommodate the art community. That building is the current Art Area site. Further, the Art Area Workshop at 25 Moorlock Terrace was the collaboration of federal, state and local governments and the Port Lincoln community. In early 2000, Art Area was a thriving centre with a CASA coordinator who successfully managed various art craft groups and individual artists. The loss of the coordinator led to the decline of the workshop, and sadly, Art Area was left somewhat unloved for years. 2018-19 saw a feasibility study conducted by Council as part of its asset management. No doubt the report of this study, Art Area Inspiring Arts and Culture, has been available to you in your deliberations on the renovation project for the 2021-22 business plan and budget. The report recommended that necessary remedial work and refurbishment be completed over 3 stages to renovate the building. This was adopted. We all remember the events of 2019, starting with the difficulties experienced in the Leisure Centre project, resulting in delays to the commencement of the art area renovations. During this time, various starting dates were suggested and meetings with Air Arts Action and the Council project officer held an art area as to the management of the renovations. Next came the pandemic, COVID-19, and everything wound to a halt. However, to the current time, the council has cast the light back on art area and the fish on the bike with a renewed commitment to the project. In 2021, art area is regularly used by approximately 250 people per month. The user groups, as I mentioned before, are the City Band, the Art Group, the Quilters Guild, the Drawing Group, and Meals on Wheels. There are also some occasional users who run sessions for things like music workshops, fabric crafts, dancing, jewellery making, painting, paper making, life drawing, as well as regular visits from Adelaide artists offering tuition and new styles and technologies. Art area also provides space and parking for medical use such as breast screen and bone scan. The Quilters Guild has successfully run fundraisers such as the Biggest Morning Tea, and the band held a wonderful concert for the bushfire appeal. Pre-COVID, Air Arts Action ran a series of monthly workshops for locals that had high participation and satisfaction. There are plans to offer more of these events, but COVID restrictions have stopped that from happening. It's our belief that the renovations, once completed, will see the rejuvenation of art area and provide wonderful opportunities for the community, not just artists. The Fish on the Bike Gallery offers a fabulous flexible space, approximately 380 square metres, with 4.2 metre ceilings and hardwood floors. This light, airy space is perfect for pursuits of art, visual and performance and other activities. Art area also offers wet areas, a print room and presses, photography room, a kitchen and toilets, although these are badly in need of updating. In addition to this, we have pottery shed with tools and wheels and a kiln shed. Specialised plumbing provides safe and sustainable waste removal. Personally, I'm very excited that the council is undertaking this project and can't wait to see the potential of this marvellous blue building unfold under the watchful eyes of the fish on the bike. As they say in the classics, build it and they will come. I'll now hand over to Raylene. She's going to speak about the plans and potential of art area and the benefits to the Port Lincoln community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for having us to come along here tonight. The art area building hasn't had any maintenance upgrades undertaken for many years. And whilst we understand the structure itself is very sound and certainly a magnificent building for its current purpose, there are quite a few items badly needing some TLC. As identified by the architects and incorporated into their draft renovation plans, the priorities in the plans include upgrades to the toilets and kitchen, renewed electrical works, new fire safety doors, improved access for disability, replacement of glass in old Hoover windows, treatment of termite damaged skirting boards, installation of ceiling fans and improved heating, and additional sinks in the wash-up area. So all of these things are desperately needed to bring the building back to being a safe, secure and accessible, fit for purpose working facility. There are no flashy, extravagant, over the top or excessive items included in these plans, just the things needed to keep people safe and to look after this wonderful asset that is available to our community. Once the renovations are complete, the facility will have potential for increased usage by other groups and events. Port Lincoln's own annual Salt Festival has grown and continually gaining momentum, with more artists, entertainers and presenters needing venues to exhibit and to perform. The Sala Festival, or the South Australian Living Artists, is an opportunity for local artists to feature in a statewide program and exhibit locally. Appropriate spaces for this are always sought after. Tunarama is a time for family activities and fun. Artaria is a perfect space to hold creative indoor workshops with tables, chairs, running water, easels, etc. already set up. The space lends itself well for visiting a local visual performing artist to hold workshops. Live drawing, painting, printmaking, jewellery making, photography and pottery are some of the activities that have been well supported in the past and are enjoying a resurgence in popularity. Creative and expressive outlets are well known to be valuable in supporting people through difficult times and assisting in mental and physical healing. Artaria will be able to offer a comfortable venue for organisations supporting youth, mental wellbeing and encouraging social engagement. As a central arts space hub, Artaria has the potential to be used every day of the week. The facility will be a valuable space for the new arts coordinator to accommodate large groups in meetings, workshops and planning forums. The ability to attract key people from the arts communities across our peninsula to come together and plan major events will be essential for the coordinator and a bonus for Port Lincoln. Country Arts SA frequently visit our region and are always looking for ways to promote and support the arts in the regions. With a suitable venue on offer and an energised arts population, more will undoubtedly follow. We acknowledge the strategies that Council adopted in its annual business plan and budget 2021-22, and in particular Goal 2, livability and active communities. The renovation to Artaria will go a long way to enabling the key focus areas of, and I'll quote from the plan, community and individual physical and mental health and wellbeing, community safety and livability, an empowered, inclusive, connected, diverse and resilient community, opportunity for children and young people to reach their potential, older people to be valued and all people to participate fully. And lastly, very relevantly, a regional centre for arts, culture and local heritage. One only has to look at the success of other regions around Australia where a robust commitment to developing visual and performing arts has resulted in increased recognition and tourism for the area. Broken Hill has long been synonymous with outback visual arts. The city has invested in its local arts community over many years and now enjoys a jam-packed arts event calendar, and with it comes a constant stream of overnight tourist stays. The art communities in the Fleurieu regions are highly regarded for the standard and diversity of artists who live and produce their work there. Major art prizes and annual exhibitions in Victor Harbor, Bulwer and the Southern Vales are key events that attract entries and visitors from across Australia. Closer to home, Kembra and Tubby Bay, two other towns that are actively promoting art and cultural events in their town and attracting visitor dollars as in doing so. Now, the Port Lincoln Art Group and the Port Lincoln Citizens Band are two of the current users of Artaria that are active in many of Port Lincoln's cultural festivals and events. For example, Tunarama exhibitions and performances, a SALT Festival event holder, a Fame Awards performer, a People's Choice Prize sponsor for the Port Lincoln Art Prize, and that's just naming a few of the things that we get involved in. Both groups also work to support other Port Lincoln entities, example, library exhibitions, an annual exhibition at the Nautilus Arts Centre, musical performances and various community events, Nat Gallery Shop commission sales and more. Having a safe, functional space that meets the needs of the visual and performing arts groups in Port Lincoln enables us to continue our support and involvement in such events that benefit our community. We commend the Council for its vision and commitment to developing art and culture for our community and for our visitors. So from the users of Artaria, thank you, Port Lincoln City Council, for your investment and your confidence in us.
Thank you very much. I'll start off the questions, but I'll put the question to David. What we budgeted in the last budget for building works there, haven't we?
720,000 is the total. That includes the roof. The roof originally wasn't in the previous calculations, but the advice that's been given is if we're going to now combine all these works, it makes sense to include and see if we can get the roof done. That is an estimate as far as the roofing is concerned.
So 720,000 and commencement time at all?
We're working through that at the moment, so.
We've already started through the preliminary plans, getting all the paperwork ready to go to market within the next couple of months. So planning is definitely already been on its way.
So now I'll make a statement, if I may. Art area has been an integral part of Port Lincoln for many, many years. I've been associated with the city, but the elected members here, I think, are pretty well the same view across the board. So we see it as extremely important, and particularly for us to be able to put that much money aside into the budget as an indicator, I think, of how we feel. So I'll just open the floor. Is there any questions from anyone? Yes, Councillor Davies.
I heard Meals on Wheels operating from there now.
Yes.
Yep, you said earlier. Is there facilities that are available to them up to standard? Because I don't believe that Meals on Wheels was actually, when Arteria's renovations came to this table, that food source, which is much needed in the community, was not actually a function through Arteria, and having to produce multiple food packages to go out to multiple people in the community, their food facilities would have to be quite up to scratch, I would imagine. And I was just wondering, are they up to scratch? Should we revisit what, do we need to do a bit more as far as the Meals on Wheels are concerned if they're going to stay on? It's just a question.
Actually, at the moment, Meals on Wheels is using what was a small room, meeting room we used to call it, as a result of COVID. I believe they were at the hospital, and when COVID came with its ugly head, they had to move quickly, and the only space that could be found, but it's an administration role.
Oh.
So they don't actually prepare food. However, it is still rather substandard and very small. They've set it up for their own furniture, etc., but yes, that's the function they do. It's not
Thanks.
food.
I thought
From what I understand, I think the food is still prepared at the hospital.
Yes.
So it's just a meeting room.
Councillor Davis.
Through you, Mayor Brent, my understanding is that when the renovations at the hospital were taking place, that Meals on Wheels lost a room up there that they were using that some years ago, and it was to be a temporary arrangement. So they seem to have now been there, I think, for about 5 years, and I would say that there's little synergy between the arts and also the Meals on Wheels health department type thing. So
I believe they were there.
they were there and they came back again.
Yes, and now they've come back as a result of
Yeah, so moving forward, my question to the arts community would be, do you see a synergy in what they're doing and what you would like that facility used for? And if there is a purpose in the future for that space, you would then engage with council to see that area freed up.
Yes,
Can I just interrupt there, Mayor Brad? I think we're probably confusing the role of the Port Lincoln Arts Group with the role of council here in terms of determining the users of the facility.
Well,
I think that's probably a question for us to work through once we go through the redevelopment, and in terms of determining who can use the facility and how they'll use the facility moving forwards.
I was asking in relation to synergy, and that there may be a purpose in time to come that the arts group might find, and that they could engage with council to have those conversations. That's what I was intimating, if that was something that they may be interested in.
Just to add on to your questions, Faye, is that there's probably not a direct synergy between art and delivering Meals on Wheels. However, some of the things we've talked about is that the renovations of the building then probably enable it to become more of a community purpose centre. And so there'll be no reason why other groups that are community focused might not use the building as well as the arts communities.
Well done, sharing is caring.
Deputy Mayor Jack.
And just the same, really, just thank you for your presentation tonight, and it is wonderful what all the young organisations in there are doing at the moment. So it's looking forward to the renovations and seeing how that space can really fully develop as well. So exciting times. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any more questions? No, thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
Item 10, elected members' reports. My activity report, I think, went out today, didn't it? Spent more time working in other areas this last couple of weeks, which was good. It's actually been very quiet for a change. Thank you very much. And Jack, I don't know whether you've been
Can I
able to
ask
do
a
anything.
question on your report?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just on the SA water projects, I noted in the EPLGA minutes, they're talking about, concurrent looking at other options. What's the current position of SA Water? And I guess when we had that meeting here, there was a lot of seemingly good intent around that really proactive engagement, and I haven't seen any of that. I know there's been some industry meetings and things. Yeah, just an update on where it's
What I can understand, that there has been industry meetings around the peninsula, and that they have been, and this is anecdotal, they're looking at getting some empirical evidence out of Boston Bay about tide salinity and other scientific aspects. The consultation really hasn't stopped, as far as I can understand it. They've been linked in with different aspects of the fishing industry, and the discussions that I had with them was basically along the lines of who's the key person to speak with, in which industry, who's the key person to speak with in whatever council and the like. So that was basically the conversation.
So First Nations consultation, where are they at with First Nations?
Don't know. It was a topic that we raised about the fact that all groups have to be discussed and sat down and have a good talk with. I suppose the key thing there was who to talk with. With the NAO group, I guided them towards a group of solicitors. The Barngarla Mob, I think they've already got their own established groups that they're talking with there. But really, it was just informal stuff that we talked to. So Indigenous was a consideration.
Just to extend off that, Mayor Brown, if I may, part of the question was in relation to the EPLGA board meeting and the discussion there. So the SA Water did provide a presentation which was very similar to the presentation provided to council and also provided to the consultation groups. There was discussion amongst other representatives from other councils about putting forward a motion to the EPLGA to support a position that the EPLGA will not support desalination plant with a discharge into Boston Bay. When that was discussed, Mayor Brad and Deputy Mayor Ridgely weren't available for the meeting, so I was the voting delegate. Basically put forward that given our council does not have a position on this, that we wouldn't be supporting any motion of the EPLGA to say a blanket no to Boston Bay for the location of discharge for the desal plant. The discussion at the EPLGA board meeting was along the lines of, if it turns out through the consultation process, which is currently undergoing with various stakeholders, including key industry groups, in particular in relation to Boston Bay, if that progresses to the point where the desal plant doesn't proceed, they don't want to see another 2 years lost before they come up with another location. So the resolution moved by the board was more along the lines of, while those conversations and discussions are going on with key stakeholders around the desal plant discharging to Boston Bay, consideration should also be made for alternative locations should that proposal not proceed where it is. So that was what's in the minutes from the EPLGA board meeting. But in terms of the SA Water update, it was no more of an update than what we've received as a council.
And just
what date was that they came and met with us? Was that?
they've done it a couple of times. Yeah. One of the underlying factors that I think I have to push out that I've been making sure that in all the discussions I have with SA Water and all the parties involved, is that whilst I require an environmentally satisfactory outcome, I'm very conscious of the fact that the city has to have water in the next couple of years, and that we have to ensure that occurs. And I know that there are other factors there from an environmental point of view, from a cultural point of view, and from an industry point of view. Back to the base level thing is that we still have to have water, and if we have issues within 2 years, we still have to have water for the city, and that's the position that I've taken.
Maybe just also to clarify, I think the other question, part of the question in there was when council received the update from SA Water, the estimated timeline was July that they would have a preferred location identified. They, to my knowledge and to our knowledge, there is still no one single preferred location for the DXL plant.
So then my follow on question is it appropriate that we request a further update, and at what point would that be reasonable, potentially for August or September, that we formally request an update? Did you want a motion to that effect, or is that something we can just do?
Yeah, I think we can just do it. I think towards the end of August.
Because I just think let's keep them on their toes, and
I know that they're actively moving in the background, but as
I understand that.
As an elected body, I think that's a fair call that we actually start to say, well, can you keep us updated, whether it be on a monthly basis or 6 monthly?
Yeah, and potentially, if it is about us having a position to progress those conversations with EPLGA, then that's valid as well. So that would be good. Thank you.
I don't want us to actually hold. I think it would be smart if we didn't push that we have a position at this stage until we actually know what the position is going to be.
Of course. Yeah, of course. But it'd be good that we keep it alive.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jack, just on that, again, a follow-up question on that. Has council been invited to the industry workshop on safety and risk around the project on the 12th or the 13th of August, I think it is. And that might be an option as well, because it is an industry group meeting, but ideally council would be there as well as a major stakeholder in the development as well.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't believe we've seen an invite, but we can certainly request to be in attendance. I know that the RDA is heavily involved in all stakeholder meetings as well, but certainly we can request an invite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other further questions on that activity report? Probably the smallest one I've ever put in on. Deputy Mayor, Jack.
Nothing to add there. I've been convalescent for 3 or 4 weeks, so nothing to report.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Broadfoot, anything beyond that?
Yeah, I just mucked up so I went to the Navigator College opening of the Stage 2 Centre of Learning, or Stage 2 bit of the school, not the celebration of learning. And we've also had a Ravendale, I sent this through to Amanda earlier, so we've had a Ravendale Community Sporting Complex Board Constitution Subcommittee meeting, of which Narelle's part of that in a hockey role. And that went really well. Thanks, ladies. That's going really well with the rewrite of the Constitution. We're supposed to have a meeting again Wednesday. We'll just have to see what happens with restrictions as to whether that happens or not.
Yeah, well, that's look, any progress down the path from where we were is going to be good, I think. So,
yeah,
good stuff. Any questions? No. Councillor Rousseau, anything to that?
Thank you. Yeah, it's very quiet month.
Yep. Councillor Lynn.
Yes, again, all happening in Ravendale, and it's been a good meeting.
Yeah.
We've had, so we'll let you know when
we've cracked it.
Yeah. Councillor Jolly's not here. Councillor Davis.
Chair the meeting and Marina Maintenance meeting on the 24th of June.
Thanks, there's progress there, which is good. Councillor Davies.
Just a special council meeting and took a lot of phone calls from constituents.
Good. Councillor Stone, she's not here. Councillor Don.
special council meeting, 28th.
Good, thanks, mate. Thank you. No further points on that. Item 11 is council committee reports and minutes. The EPLGA board meeting held on the 2nd of July. Is there any discussion on that at all? Any qualifying questions required on that?
That's right, we can talk later about the EPLGA drafted business plan, and yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, so can I have a move for the recommendation then, please? Deputy Mayor Jack, do you want to talk on it too? No. Can I have a second for it, please? Councillor Ling, would you like to talk on that? Is there any clarifying questions at all? Any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 12 is the Chief Executive Officer reports, resolution status report. Matt, do you want to talk on that at all?
Thanks, Mayor Brad. As written, just reminded that we've changed the format, so we're not trying to provide a summary in the actual report. So all of the commentary update is in the actual attachment. And I will just note that there is a number of items in there which are referred to the annual business plan as projects this year. Next month, Council will receive a report on the annual business plan with the timings of implementation of projects and initiatives in the annual business plan. So the questions that were raised earlier in terms of, the timing of when we're going to commence with the art area project or when we're going to commence with some of the environmental initiatives, they'll be answered and they'll be in the form of Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and then we'll report on that every 3 months to Council. So next month you'll have a breakdown of the annual business plan projects, many of which are contained in here, and the timing of when we'll commence on those projects. We just want to provide that clarity to elected members and to the community on when we'll be commencing with projects, because otherwise you see a whole list of projects and no commencement, and the reality is some of those projects won't commence until Q2, Q3, Q4 as we go through the year. So happy to take questions on that.
Any questions? Can I have a mover then, please? Councillor Dodd, would you like to talk on it? I have a second, please. Councillor Davis, would you like to talk on it? Is there any statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 12.1 is the resolution status report. Oh, sorry, I'll take that back. Get used to your new pen. 12.2 is the EPLGA draft annual business plan consultation.
Through you, Mayor Brad.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep. So, a formality. So the council may not have seen this in the past, but we've basically EPLGA has requested feedback now on the draft annual business plan for 21-22, and I guess there's a number of things that were raised at the board meeting and discussed that we just want to reiterate support for. So the recommendation for council tonight is to note the draft annual business plan and budget 21-22. That it welcomes the review of the EPLGA governance structures. So it was a motion that was moved at the board meeting that a consultant be engaged to actually review the governance of the EPLGA in terms of its resourcing, in terms of its structures, in terms of its adherence with process, in terms of approvals for annual business plans and the like. There's probably also some considerations in there for the relationship between the EPLGA, the RDA, and also the NRM board and some of those relationships and the questions that can be raised through that governance review process. I think the other factor that's been relevant to the EPLGA in the last 6 months or so is the need for strategic planning. So I think as part of the resolution that we actually, the council, request or encourage a strong focus on strategic planning in the next few months from the EPLGA, preferably with the development of a 4-year plan. With also a focus on how the accumulated surplus is going to be expended to the benefit of the member councils. There's over $500,000 in accumulated surplus in the forecast and the long-term financial plan in the annual business plan. By the year 2028, estimates it'll be $800,000. There's no point in the EPLGA sitting on $800,000 when there's projects that need to be conducted across the region. And that we also recommend that at a minimum, the draft annual business plan and the draft 4-year strategic plan is presented by April 2022 back to the member councils for consideration and feedback. So the resolution that you see there tonight is one that's been drafted and circulated to the CEOs across the region. So I suspect that the member councils will all be moving very similar recommendations in response to the draft annual business plan. But happy to take questions on that. Councillor Broadwood.
Yeah, I've just got a question on the work plan, and there's a whole lot of, evaluation of successful KPIs that are about attending meetings. and, you know, that we went to meetings and, you know, and then like within the business plan, and I understand that it's hard to quantify, you know, value. I guess there's some vagaries within the reporting that the strategic planning process will firm up as an opportunity, but I think getting some clarity around some actual results, so that, yeah, that would be, it's a good opportunity for us, I guess. And yeah, I mean, we can all fill our life with meetings, but I like to see things happen, and, you know, that we're resourcing this. So yeah, I'm just interested in your comments on that.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Brad, I think the governance review is the probably more appropriate avenue for feedback in relation to the performance of the EPLGA board, but also the executive. And I think in particular, when we look at the structure, so I mean, the EPLGA board has a CEO committee that sits underneath it, as a tourism advisory committee and other working groups as well. It's the governance review is really to look at the role of each of those committees in determining the strategic plan, but then the annual business work plan. And I think the governance review in particular will start to bring out some of the factors in terms of, at the moment, the CEO committee is serviced and supported and administered by CEOs across the region. Now, no CEO in this region, I believe, is actually paid by their constituent council to provide administrative support to the EPLGA. So there's factors like that, but also the CEO committee should be used as a vetting platform for supporting the strategic plan of the EPLGA and providing guidance to the EPLGA executive officer in the performance of that plan, but also the end of work plans. So I think what you're alluding to will come through as part of the governance review for the EPLGA.
You're going to have to have
there's some work to be done in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be able to,
Yeah, I just want to know you're onto it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
you've got to be measuring what you've got. Going to a meeting is not a measurement.
No.
So,
Thanks.
another question for you, Mayor Brad. It's with that surplus that is sitting there, and a growing surplus, is there an opportunity for this council, which I imagine is part of the discussion, to influence how that might be applied? Because at the moment, just flagging an example of a project, at the moment there's a $75 billion initiative covering West Coast and South Australia through into Western Australia, looking at a renewable energy zone. And it would be a significant opportunity for the councils on the peninsula to combine on looking at how that could be enabled and set up in a sense across this region. So that would be a wonderful way to apply some of those surplus funds to the EPLGA for the benefit of all councils in the region.
And I think through Mayor Brad, that's the exact reason why we're asking for a 4-year strategic projects plan, so that we can actually have input as member councils into the development of the key projects that the EPLGA needs to work on, and how that money will be spent on those projects. So I think tonight's probably too early to be inputting to that process. That will be part of the strategic planning process. But certainly that's the idea, is that as a membership organisation that services the region, the regional councils, we need to be having input in some sort of value-added way in terms of what's coming out of the EPLGA.
And from a strategic perspective. Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, just probably a comment from Matthew. Do you see with the allocation of time to the exec officer, that role reverting back to more of a secretarial role than probably a strategic role, which it was previously, and a full-time position essentially funded?
Through you, Mayor Brad. So my understanding of the resourcing arrangements at the moment, and this is part of the review also, and just context of the board meeting, there was a presentation at the board meeting by the Limestone LGA. The Limestone LGA is financially resourced. The subscription fees from the member councils are considerably larger than what we pay on the Eyre Peninsula. It has 6 or 7 full-time staff. They secure millions of dollars worth of grant funding each year that benefit the councils. The MRLGA is resourced by 1 full-time executive officer with support from the RDA. The EPLGA here is 0.6 executive officer, and 0.4 of that executive officer is effectively labour hired back to the RDA. So the only resource available to the EPLGA at the moment is a 0.6 for executive officer. with some administrative support from the RDA, which is paid for at cost. So I guess in terms of answering the question, I think the resourcing for the EPLGA needs to be addressed through the governance review. I would suggest that the executive officer position, given if you look at the annual business plan, the financials, it's a $140,000, $147,000 a year role at a 0.6. You would want that to be at a strategic level, not as an administrative support level.
Any other questions?
I've got a further question then. So based on the breakdown in the relationship of RDAEP and Whyalla Council, and then having that role sitting within RDAEP, is there any impacts there strategically, and how is that being managed?
Well, not a question I'm going to answer. I think the relationship between the RDA and Whyalla is separate from the relationship between Whyalla and the EPLGA. So Whyalla is still a member of the EPLGA. If there's a labour hire agreement or some sort of agreement between the EPLGA and the RDA for that 0.4, that would be separate to any other discussions.
Yeah, I don't think there's any dilution of Whyalla and the EPLGA membership I can see at this stage. I thought so for a while, but I don't think so.
Oh no, I'm just wondering about perception as well and how that works,
I don't think they're backing away at this stage. That's not the impression I've got at the moment. Any other questions? Councillor Davis.
Through you, Mayor Brad, you talked about relationships with the likes of the RDA, Department of Environment, things like that. That certainly needs to get stronger, and we need to define what that looks like and what our expectations are as councils across the region. So, when they all work with their regional focus, I think we've actually.
Question.
All right. Well, my question is that something that the EPLGA are going to be looking at? Is to define and get more clarity around what their roles are within and how they actually entwine themselves into the EPLGA?
I would hope through Mayor Brad that is an outcome of the governance review, but also a strategic planning process. And I think that's where.
Has there been conversation around it?
Well, I think not specifically around the relationships, but I think if you look at the planning processes at the moment, they are historically the RDA, the EPLGA and the NRM board. And I think largely that comes down to the previous executive officer having strong relationships in those areas. I think that needs to come out of those two processes moving forwards and delineating the responsibilities and the roles in those relationships, but then how we can maximise those relationships, but with very clear boundaries on responsibilities so that we know what the role of the RDA is as opposed to the EPLGA and how those duties are separated if you've got one officer being shared between two organisations. But I think the other thing here is I'm not historically aware of how much engagement councils have been encouraged to have with the EPLGA in terms of the feedback on their business plans and the strategic planning processes. And I think one thing that we'll be advocating clearly for, and I think this was evident at the board meeting, is through the CEO network, we'll be advocating for greater involvement and ownership of the elected member bodies of each of the councils of the EPLGA itself, because it is an organisation that serves the councils, not vice versa.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Question, Councillor Davis?
Oh, not a question, I was
Well,
going
I'm
on.
going to take questions tonight. Yep. All right, so no more questions? Okay, now can I have a mover, please? Councillor Dodd, do you want to speak on it?
It's just through deja vu here, because I can recall before council pulled out of membership of the EPLGA 7 years ago, similar questions were being asked. This is performance standards and strategic directions, etc. So it seems to evolve. But I haven't moved that recommendation.
Thanks very much. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Davies, Davis.
I'm fine, thank you.
Yep. Is there any further clarifying questions at all? Any statements for or against? Show of hands, please. All those in favour? Motion carried. On 12.3 is the local government boundary reform. Over to you, Matt. This is a very interesting one, this one.
Thanks, Mayor Brad. Now, I will just remind elected members, because I did send out some correspondence today. So there's the report as written, and have also provided correspondence which will table as draft correspondence and a draft boundary change map. Now, on the basis of that, also just a reminder for those elected members, if there's anyone, given that this is the first time you will be seeing a definitive map of the proposal, if there's any elected members that have got property within those boundaries, my advice is to declare a perceived conflict of interest in this point in time. So,
I would say.
Yeah.
So,
There, perceived interest in,
okay, so you'll put paperwork in later?
will be.
Yeah, so Councillor Davies got a perceived conflict, anyone else?
No.
Okay, that's good.
no, I mean, there's a long way to go on this journey if council decides to take this journey on, but given that information was circulated, I just thought it was an opportunity to remind elected members that it might be worthwhile putting up the conflict of interest. Just to go back and just quickly recap on the journey so far, I guess one of the strategic prerogatives of council in the strategic directions plan is to look at local government reform. And I think when we were talking around the terminology in the strategic directions plan, we wanted to make sure that it was broad enough to cover reform, but also still specific enough to look at the notion of boundary realignment or amalgamations in that regard. For those who can recall the workshops from late last year when we started to look at our financial sustainability, we looked at one of the factors that was the need to look at boundary reform and look at the distribution of grading burden across the rate base. And I think there's two factors to that. There's a local government reform bill which is now passed, which is going to force a change from site value to capital value, and that's one factor that we'll need to deal with. The other factor is looking at Section 26 of the Act in terms of is there a larger draw on our resources and should that be reflected in boundary realignment reform? The other catalyst for this was the motion of council from March, which was in relation to requesting a report on the process for boundary reform. So I guess combining those two things, what we've presented tonight is a report outlining the process for requesting boundary reform discussions, but then also a recommendation to initiate discussion with the Boundary Commission and seek feedback on the potential prospect of boundary reform, particularly looking at some suburbs to the north of Port Lincoln. So in terms of the process and procedurally, we had a conversation with Peter Relly, who's the Executive Officer of the Boundaries Commission, and that was as a result of the resolution from March, and just discuss the process and how council would go about lodging a boundary change request or a proposal. And I think based on those conversations, it was pretty clear that the guidelines have been published and released. It's all available online, but the report contains links to the guidelines, particularly Guideline 1 and Guideline 3, which are being published by the Boundary Commission. And the advice in there was for council, the elected members, to have a look at those guidelines prior to the meeting tonight as well. The concept of putting in a proposal can be initiated by a range of people, a member of the community. It can be initiated by council or a group of councils, and there's no need for consultation prior to submitting a proposal for consideration. The Boundary Commission has a publication policy, so any proposals received are published on their website, and they also provide notice to any affected parties or councils through that process. So there's no need for this discussion to be held in confidence, because if the council does decide to submit a proposal, it will be public anyway. So it's best that it's a public conversation, public discussion. So the process is effectively, if council wishes to pursue with a proposal for boundary change, it's a two-stage process which is requested by the Commission. The first stage is to write to the Commission and seek preliminary consideration or an initial consideration of a potential proposal, which is basically a very non-committal way of saying, hey, we've got this idea, this is what we think. What do you think about that before we spend any time investing resources and money into developing the concept further? And that's what the Commission prefers. And then from there, they can give an initial assessment, which is basically, this is not going to proceed, it doesn't have a lot of merit. Don't waste your time spending money getting work done on this. Or if they believe that the proposal does have merit, then they'll invite stage 2 proposal, which is where council needs to go through a process of consultation, needs to go through a process of analysis, needs to come up with firm boundaries for the proposed changes, and then submit that to the Commission for consideration. Given the timeliness of processing these kinds of reform, and if the members have looked at the website, you'll see that there's probably 6 or 7 examples of proposals which have been submitted to the Commission since 2019. None of those proposals have progressed to completion or final assessment, so it's not a short process. So I guess on the basis of understanding the process, but also understanding that this is a discussion that we will need to have at some point in the future, the recommendation then turns to, well, now is probably not a bad time to initiate, because once we also head into the election period, I'm not sure the exact off the top of my head timeframes, but there will be restrictions on any of these major changes as we head into next year, into the election cycle, but also into the state elections as well. So there could be some delays with any sort of processing and considerations for boundary change. So on the basis of that, the recommendation tonight is A, receive the report on the process for boundary change, but also then to consider authorising the Mayor to write to the Boundary Commission, which you've now got the draft letter, so you know what the contents of that letter will be, requesting initial consideration for a change. And the initial change at this point is being recommended that we ask for consideration for the suburb definitions of Boston and Teotuckia to be included into the boundaries of City of Port Lincoln. As with the letter, for those who have had a chance to read the letter, which we're tabling tonight, the initial consideration is for those suburbs, but we're expressing in that letter that, subject to feedback from the Commission and also from the District Council of the Lower Area Peninsula, Council would be open to discussing broader changes which may encompass larger areas. So it might encompass the suburb of Sleaford, Duck Ponds, or even further north to North Shields and Point Boston. But I guess we're starting with what we're seeing on the ground as evidence from the community. As you know, there's very strong connection between Boston and Teotuckia to the City of Port Lincoln, but we're open to discussion around expanding that boundary a little bit further, should there be a need to, or evidence that supports expanding that proposal out a little bit further. So with that as the basis for the report tonight, and we've included some evidence just as a sort of cursory look in terms of supporting the application. So the census data, for example, supports the notion that the population growth and the residential development growth across the Lower Eyre Peninsula has really been within 10 k's of Port Lincoln. So even though the District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula has had population growth of 35% since 2001 through to 2016, Cummins has actually had a decline of 15% population. Coffin Bay has had an increase of 5%. But then when you look at Boston, which is within 6k radius of Port Lincoln, the population growth there has been 79%. So you would argue, from a summary look at the data, that the population growth in District Council of Lower Eyre Peninsula has been Port Lincoln's population growth, which then means there's a strong argument to include that within the rateable assessments for the City of Port Lincoln to provide those infrastructure and services to that community. There's other anecdotal evidence such as the Your Say registrations. So interestingly, 13% of the Your Say registrations, which we launched 2 months ago, have been from members of the Lower Eyre Peninsula community. And then other information such as the My Local app, which when we promoted the My Local app back in March, when we launched that, there was an 84% increase in residents of the Lower Eyre Peninsula Council downloading the My Local app. So there's a lot of indicators that suggest that there's a very strong connection with people in those outlying suburbs to the City of Port Lincoln, more so than to the communities of Cummins, which is 58 kilometres away, and to the communities of Coffin Bay, which is 38 kilometres away. So on the basis of that, and on the basis of understanding the process and the timelines associated with that boundary change request, the recommendation is tonight to basically proceed with correspondence to the Commission with a preliminary proposal for boundary changes. Happy to take questions on that. And I apologise, we would have had a briefing session on this earlier in the month, but we had at least 4 apologies for that session, so it didn't seem to make much sense to proceed with that.
So any clarifying questions for
Matt, you said from discussion from district council and commission, you were willing to take into account other areas. Would that include talker and community consultation? You know, if we had, say, like, because the process has to include community consultation, if there was a lot of, you know, talk and feedback from community consultation about other areas, would that be considered also, or is it just from the council and commission?
Look, I think community consultation is a requirement for the stage 2 proposal. So if council tonight decides to submit a preliminary proposal to the commission comes back and says, yes, there's merit in this, let's progress it to a stage 2 proposal, there will be a requirement then to undergo prolonged or more detailed conversations with Lower Air, but also with the community. And the results of those processes will feed into the final proposal. The council then needs to decide whether it submits that to the boundary commission. So yes, community consultation will be taken on board as part of that process for developing a stage 2 proposal. And I think Tolka, sorry, Mayor Brad, I believe Tolka is technically part of the Sleaford suburb definition. So if that encompasses Sleaford, it also encompasses Tolka.
Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, no, I think you've got your boundary adjustment there right. They drive, I think, to your north boundary and Chapman Road back to the Flinders Island, a bit over the other side as well. What I do like in your report is you haven't mentioned the word amalgamation, which is crucial.
Well,
Questions?
I thought you were just asking for,
Clarify
what was the
questions.
word? Sorry.
Amalgamation.
okay. The
Amalgamation.
question would be, there's going to need an essential media campaign to support this from day one. Have you got anything in mind at this stage, as far as media?
Through you, Mayor Brad. So in terms of standard process for items like this, if council moves a particular direction tonight, we'll prepare media releases on these. So the initial media release on this, should council move this way, we've also got a member of the media here with us this afternoon, this evening. So we'll prepare a media release on the basis of what's been submitted. The letter itself, there's no reason why that would not be made publicly available for all to see. And a copy of the letter will also be provided to Lower Air Peninsula. But I think at this point, the key message here is that this is the start of a conversation. Now we can have that conversation as broadly as we want amongst ourselves or amongst the community or amongst councils, but until we actually get some feedback from the Boundaries Commission, those conversations are just effectively wasting time. Because the Boundary Commission will tell us yes or no whether this proposal has merit or not straight off the bat, and whether we progress to that second stage. So I think the key message will go out is that this is the start of a conversation. Once we have some feedback from the Boundaries Commission on whether it's got merit, then we'll obviously do more detailed conversations with the community, the key stakeholders, and we'll have to do a lot more analysis around the financials. I think one of the key things, and it's not mentioned in the report also, in relation to disadvantage. This is not about disadvantaging other councils. It's about looking at how we sustainably provide for the growth of the Portland community. There will also need to be some realisation of the asset cost, because there'll be a whole lot of things that need to be worked through with the Boundary Commission, with the two councils in terms of transfer of asset values, any debt associated with assets and all those factors. But that's all part of the next stage. The Boundary Commission, as I said, they haven't even progressed to finalise one of the proposals yet, and they'll be thinking about how they implement those sort of things with any proposal changes. So I think the key message at this point is it's the start of a conversation, and we'll work out where to from there once we hear back from the Boundary Commission.
I think also there's been a lot of informal discussion with District Council Lower Air Peninsula about initially amalgamation and then rolling into boundary realignment. But I think we've held off for quite some time now, pending an outcome from the other applications that are already before the government at the moment. So don't seem to be coming through. So it's probably about the right time. So, Jack, you had a question?
Not a question, but it says.
Well, hang on, mate, we're still in.
If there's, all right.
Yeah. If you've got a statement, I'll get it off you afterwards. But if you've got questions, anyone else have any questions? Okay. Thanks for that, Matt. Can I have a move for the recommendation, please? Deputy Mayor Jack.
That was going to be mine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's where he was going.
Yeah, okay, do you want to make a statement?
Basically on that, just have to move that on the basis that this is really seeking initial consideration of potential boundary change. It just asked the Commission for consideration of this, given that it has cost implications for this council. I think it's a very good way to progress it. It's not initiating something, it's basically just starting that conversation. So very happy to recommend this.
Thanks, Jack. Can I have a second for it, please? Deputy, no, not anymore, eh? Councillor Davis, I'm sorry.
I'm certainly happy to move the motion. I think that it's very sensible, very timely, and I think that we've had lots of conversation around the engagement and participation of people in the outlying areas and their desire to be involved in a variety of ways in our community. So I'm pleased that this has been initiated.
Thanks. So I ask if there's any further clarifying questions. I have statements for and against them, please.
I'll just speak for it. Yeah, I just really appreciate the clarity in the report, and it's simple and clear, and yeah, I think it's a great way to start that conversation in a respectful way through a process. So look forward to seeing how it unfolds.
Great. Anyone else would like to make a statement for or against? Councillor Russell.
I think this is really exciting that we're starting this. The number of people that live at Boston that were talking to me that wanted to be far more involved with foreshore and things like that, because they're always coming in here and using it. And the number of people keep saying to me, when are you going to realign the boundaries? You know, so it's showing that we are moving forward and trying to do something, whether it happens or not, but at least they can see that we're actually doing something. Yeah, and it's not a 10-year plan, so to speak. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Any further statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Good report. Thanks, Pat. Question. I do have a question. Stage 2, is there funds available from the state government to push something through?
To take that on notice there, Brad, I wouldn't have thought the state would provide funds for it, given the proposals they've got before them. But I can take that and ask
Item 13 is corporate community reports. 13.1 is finance and business review of the rates concession scheme for development. It's an upgrade of the policy. David, would you like to speak on that at all?
Thanks, Matt, Brad. Pretty straightforward. It's the first of 2 policies that we're putting up tonight. Have just made a point, because every year we wonder, should we actually carry on with this policy? But we brought it here this evening, and I've made a note in the report that this is now likely going to be looked at quite closely by our new manager of economic tourism and growth. And so next year it may well be different, but for now we thought let's just leave the status quo as is. And so we brought it here for adoption.
Are there any clarifying questions? Councillor Mover or Councillor Broadfoot, would you like to speak on it?
Thank you.
A second, please. Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on it?
Thank you.
Is there any clarifying questions further? Statements for and against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Thanks, David. Item 13.2 is people governance and communications. Neil. Item 13.3 is community culture and recreation, review of the community grant funding policy.
Mayor Brad?
Yes.
I think I might have to do a perceived conflict of interest here as well, due to the fact that community house bid successful and I actually get paid by community house.
Okay, noted. Is that an actual or a perceived?
Actually, whatever. I don't think it's really got anything to do with community house as such.
You'll fix the paperwork up afterwards. So
I would suggest. No.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't think it's
So
the same.
I'd suggest, I mean, it's your call, but I'd suggest perceived, and it's the same as the other elected members. So when you're deciding on a policy, not on the actual grant funding, then there could be the perception that.
Yeah, that's what I thought, so I thought I'd stay because I don't think there's, even if it is perceived, I'm being transparent and.
yeah, okay, so you got a better phone book between the night, I think.
Yeah,
Just-
I've got a whole book
are you happy?
And we'll just reiterate that also that Councillor Broadfoot, Councillor Elsell and Deputy Mayor Ritchie have also there to see conflicts in this item.
Yeah, so if you fix the paperwork up afterwards, please.
Done that already.
Oh, okay, good, good stuff. Okay, where are we? David?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Again, this shouldn't be a surprise. It's a follow on from the major grant funding reporting that we've done earlier, where we're recommending that the livable and active communities grant funding now gets a time period allocated to it, which will be for 2 years. So the policy's just been amended to reflect that, and the report also goes into the detail around that as well. And on the basis that council pass all the recommendations this evening, in the next month or so, we will go out to the community to ask for their expressions of interest to be submitted, which will then be brought to council.
Okay, any clarifying questions of David? Right, have a mover, please. Councillor Rouse, would you like to speak on it?
No,
Can I have a second, please? Councillor Lynn, would you like to speak on it? No. Any further questions? Any statements for and against? All those in favour? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, David. Item 14 is the environment and infrastructure reports. Infrastructure and assets, there are none. Development services, there are none. Item 14.3 on environment and community safety, introduction of food inspection fees. We've got here JP and Narelle.
Thanks. Just there.
And just to clarify that we've got received conflicts being declared for this item as well.
Yes, okay. That's noted for Councillor Davies. Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair, this one is about April 2020. There was a principal agreement that we're going to introduce the food safety inspection fees, and then a further report is due to council for considerations around the costings and what that might look like. So we did some modelling on the fees and charges, and look at the regulations and what we're allowed to charge and what not. And through the modelling, we had to, with all modelling, do some assumptions. Some of those assumptions assume that there was going to be no reoccurring or re-inspections, so all businesses are compliant. Assume through the year we're not going to do any of the smaller P4 businesses, and that there's no CPI increases, and the model for the 2021 was also based on the current year. So we took a lot of things into consideration. But then also, you'd look at tonight where there's lockdowns in place again and all that sort of stuff, or not lockdowns, restrictions, pardon me. But for some businesses, there's some impact. And so with that being considered, we talked about it, and we were thinking that if we were to implement a particular fee, we probably would have to go in with potentially a 50% reduction or introduction kind of fee for this financial year, with then the intent of actually having the full fee the following year onwards, and then that will get reviewed as per the Food Act 2001 Regulation 13. Now, something to consider is just, and I'm assuming the report was read, but just a few things to highlight is that regardless of the fees that we were allowed to charge, so even if we charge what is in the regulation, we will not have necessarily 100% recoverable fee, so we will still be a little bit out of pocket. But again, if one of those assumptions is that all these businesses are compliant, which they probably won't be, if there are a few non-compliant businesses and we charge those as well, then eventually we might be able to break even. And if there is any additional funding throughout these fees and charges, we can, obviously this will facilitate two things, which is offsetting the ratepayers' fees, but also then potentially reinvesting in some food safety or food knowledge programs and things like that. So, so anyway, the proposed fees there, as stated in the recommendation for the 50%, would be then for small businesses would be around the $65 for the inspections, and for large businesses, which is 20 or more food handling staff, was around $163.50. So That's the 50%. Obviously, the following year, that would be double those fees, double those numbers. But we are regulated by the Food Act 2001 about how much we can actually charge. So you can't just go and charge whatever you feel like. There's strict rules around that as well. So, yes.
So Mr. Eubank, why are you doubling it in the following year? Sorry.
It's not doubling, we're halving it this year. So what we're charging the following year is going to be the actual fee. But we're just thinking that, you know, with all the code things and all that,
Right.
and you know, some businesses might not have budgeted for this year necessarily. So sort of easing it into the fees and charges this year
Thank you.
by halving it.
So you have.
So sorry, I shouldn't say double it. We are halving the fee we want to
Thank
charge,
you.
and then the
That's-
following year we'll actually charge the right fee.
Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Just a question through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if there's been much conversations with businesses around this, and I mentioned that because in a councillor role, I got contacted by a business saying they were concerned about the fees, given that, you know, some of the challenges over the last year and a half as well.
Absolutely.
And I was just wondering, had there been more feedback from other businesses on that? Certainly I've only heard from one, but whether there've been more.
I'm happy to have some discussions with those businesses as well and help them understand around this fee and the fee structures as well. As part of this report, there was some feedback that was given, but predominantly this is a follow-on from the previous report. However, there is also a schedule on the different risk ratings of different businesses, and at a minimum, you know, we're looking at once a year kind of thing. So, you know, a fee of $100 or $200 for the year. Especially if it's a compliant business, I don't think that people shouldn't be alarmed. It's not council coming for them and trying to really, you know, it's not a money-making scheme if you know what I mean. It's more around
Cost
just
recovery for services.
it's a cost recovery, absolutely.
Councillor Broadfoot.
Through you, Mayor Brad, I know in the report, didn't it say once every 2 years on average?
Some businesses will have so P3 risk businesses is once every 2 years, and then there's I think the P2 businesses is around once every 18 months.
Okay, so, yes.
Narelle, did you want to add?
The higher the risk to the business, the more frequently you would be inspected. So the minimum frequency on a P1 being the highest risk of the food service that they deliver is 12 months.
Okay. Yeah, so the maximum they're looking at is the 317 or whatever it is for the year, once we get to the.
That's for a
second.
large business.
Yes.
And we haven't actually taken, we've never asked for those because we don't charge a fee, or it's not a stat we take. We're presuming there may be 3 in town if there isn't 3. So most of our businesses will be the large business. So as somebody with 20 food handlers,
So that'd be George Lawrence, very well.
that full-time, so 20 full-time FTE,
Okay,
full-time equivalent. So you'd be,
I think
you
it's
may
also,
be looking at like a Coles or a Woolworths, and
okay.
maybe in a hotel.
Because that was going to be my next question. What's the definition of a large business and what's the definition of food handling within that? Is that carrying the plate or is that?
It's handling the food, yeah, correct. So at what point is correct?
So is it preparing the food or is it handling? Is it taking the plate out?
And under the South Australian Health, there is some contention around that and to what they are. So I would say at this point, handling that food could be taking the food out because you're actually
Yeah.
coming in.
Councillor Davis.
But Delta
So are you
would
coming-
come in as a small business.
Yeah,
Councillor Davis.
Through you, Mayor Brad, Narelle, when we're looking at P1, or business like large business, are we looking at hospitals and nursing homes as well? They don't come under our jurisdiction.
no, they are audited business, they're food
Yes.
audited businesses,
Okay,
so they're
good.
not food inspections, yes. So we're looking at catering and cafes and restaurants.
Is there any other clarifying questions?
So another question.
Deputy Mayor, and I'll come back to you. Then.
It was whether on that recommendation we could add the 20 FTE. So it clarifies, so some of those businesses might not worry so much if they knew that that's 20 FTE.
and I just want to clarify, so those businesses that are the 18 months and 24 months are the P2 and P3 businesses, which are small businesses. So they're looking at the lesser fee as well. So it's around, you know, not the reduced fee, but even at the full fee, it's $100 or 100 and whatever it works out to be over a 2-year period for some of those businesses.
Councillor Davies.
So I was asked by a business owner, if businesses are having to pay, can they choose their own health inspector from outside council?
Not for a food safety inspection, no. It's our jurisdiction within our council to inspect the businesses within the city of Port Lincoln.
And the second question is, so what are you actually out of pocket for? So what is it that you are looking to, what costs are you looking to recover?
Sorry. So through me, Brad.
It doesn't really cost much to go into a business. Have a look around. It costs them actually.
Table.
Yeah. So through me, Brad. The cost is around the actual time it takes for the staff to do the audits and work with at least a lot of paperwork before and after preparing and so forth. So the cost is in the actual time for the officers to actually conduct the wages and so forth. There's minimal other overheads like, you know, getting the forms and documentation and things like that ready as well. But yeah, so it's mainly the operational side of the people that we're trying to recover the cost for.
So I suppose the point is that we've been providing a service at no cost for some time.
And the rate pay is actually footing the bill.
Yes, okay, thanks. Okay, is there any other
So
clarifying
just
question?
another question, so just totally a bit off topic, so if we're going to recover costs for to out-of-pocket costs for wages, is council going to introduce everyone to pay $5 that drives a car to pay for a parking inspector next? You know, like, isn't that what the rate revenue is given to council to pay for wages?
I don't think that,
Brad,
So I mean, that's a totally different topic, but it's
it is
still
a
the same,
totally different topic, and I think the difference here is you've got a prescribed legislated requirement for council to undertake food inspections. You've got a regulation which prescribes fees which can be charged for those services, which is a cost recovery basis. There's an aspect here when we go through the service level reviews where we will need to prescribe the services we provide to the community, which of those services will be provided at full cost recovery, which will be provided out of the rates revenue. When we're looking at the overall mixture of council rates revenue and how it's expended on service delivery, we've got officers from a department will be consumed with inspections and follow-up inspections, which will be a drain on resources. Now, part of this is also around the deterrent for businesses to actually do the right thing so they don't have those resources in there. So given that there's a regulatory structure, there's prescribed fees that can be applied to this, and my understanding is we're one of the very few councils that don't actually charge food inspection fees. It's not as simple as just saying, well, why don't we just charge $5 for people to drive to the city, because there is no prescribed process for that. So there's benchmarks and standards for this across the state, and we're one of the few who are not implementing. So in terms of that, it's not quite as saying the same thing. That's what you're saying. What I would suggest in this instance, if I may there, Brad, with the recommendation is that we actually remove part 2 of the recommendation, because I think we should only be dealing with the fees for this financial year, not setting the standard of what we're doing for the fees for next financial year. And I would also suggest that we remove the as a 50% introduction fee, considering this new charge to business above the table, and that we actually put that wording into the first part of the recommendation, which is the council resolves to adopt the following food safety inspection fees as a reduced amount from the maximum prescribed fee, close bracket, to be included in the City of Port Lincoln 21-22 fees and charges schedule as per the table below. And then I think we need to add a 5th line in the table, which is actually detailed in the report, which is not contained in the recommendation. Is that there will be no fee for community-based and not-for-profit organisations. I think that then sums up the intent of Council's previous resolution on this matter, and then provides some clarity in there. Okay, so it's totally Council's prerogative. There's a framework for this. There's a prescribed fee which is gazetted each year by the state government for these fees and for this purpose. It's totally council's prerogative whether it wants to proceed with this. Council's asked for a further report. The further report's there. It's up to council now to decide whether it wants to.
Is there any further clarifying questions on the report? Okay, with the amended recommendation up there, I have a mover, please. Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on?
No, I think it's fair. I think it's astute not to charge full tow dollars first up.
Yes.
I think there needs to be a bit of support shown to businesses, not to try and take with the schools.
Yeah. I have a second, please. Councillor Davis, would you like to speak on?
No, I think that's job well done, and thank you. And I think that introduction being paced is a good thing and helping the community to. And thank you for taking on board, considering we are one of the last group and we've got legislative the act to meet and also food regulations. So thank you.
Is there any further clarifying questions or statements for or against? Do you have a statement for or against, Councillor Davis?
I'd like to speak against this motion from conversations with various businesses that I've had. Businesses are already paying fees to have seats on council pavement, which is revenue raising for council. The last health inspector did the entire job on his own and had great respect from the community and businesses and did regular inspections. Now council has engaged a coordinator environment and community safety officer. They've engaged a senior environment officer and they've engaged a environmental officer. So ratepayers are now contributing at a rough guess of over 200,000 to this position, or 3 lots of wages compared to 1 wage. Yet, from talking to business owners, no one's had an inspection for 3 years. So I just think that council need to stop using businesses and people as cash, flow, and look within their own establishment to be more productive and proactive with the rate revenue already received. This cost will not increase food businesses to comply. Every business is trying their absolute best to protect public health through their food premises. As no one wants a bad reputation, this fee is solely a revenue raiser for council to pay wages, which, the health inspector has one job: to inspect. Go forward and do what the ratepayers are already paying you to do. If the policy is passed, I believe it's just double dipping. That's my comment.
Thanks, Councillor Davies. Is there any other statements for or against?
I'll call a point of order on that statement because, I think that's...
It's a breach of legislation or regulation there.
Well, I just believe that it's out of context, it's taken out of context under a perceived conflict of interest process, and also it's targeting staff within who are in the room around a regulatory requirement, and I just think it's inappropriate.
And if I can respond to that.
Just hang on a second. Okay, so yeah, go ahead, Councillor Davies.
My statement isn't directed to staff at all, Andrea. It's directed to the elected members that are voting on this policy. Not at all to the staff, because the staff don't vote.
So I'm not comfortable with it being a point of order, as I don't believe that there has been a breach of legislation or regulation there. However, the points that you've raised are noted, and I'm now going to put it to a vote unless there is anyone else that has a statement for or against. All those in favour? Motion carried. Oh, sorry. All those against?
And I'll call a division.
Division. I'll put aside the previous vote. All those that are voting in favour of this motion, please stand. Please be noted that in favour is Councillor Broadfoot, Councillor Rousell, Councillor Lynn, Councillor Davis, Deputy Mayor Ritchie, and Councillor Dodd. Councillor Davies is against. Please be seated. The motion is carried. Item 14.4 is major projects, nil. Item 15 is confidential council committee reports and minutes. Item 15.1 is the annual review of confidential orders register. Matt, do you want to talk on that, Matt?
No, this is largely procedural. The reports there, effectively, the confidential register has some notations against it, whether it's to retain in confidence release and noting that all of the confidential resolutions will be released at the natural conclusion of their confidentiality order. So unless there's specific questions on that, it's as per the attachments. Thanks, Mayor President.
Thanks. Any clarifying questions of Matt at all? Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ling, would you like to speak on that? Can I have a second, please? Deputy Mayor Jack, do you want to speak on it, Jack? Any further clarifying questions? Statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 16, confidential reports. Over to you, Matt. This is a recommendation to go into confidence. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Dodd, would you like to speak on it? I have a second. Councillor Rousseau, would you like to speak on it? Questions? Statements for or against? All those in favour? Motion carried.